So living in Europe, it's kind of a crazy place. And one of the things I learned when I moved here is that I knew absolutely nothing about living in Europe. I was the standard North American, Canadian in my case, but just as bad as you Americans. And I knew very little about actually what life was like in Europe. I hadn't even visited as a tourist. That said, the way most North Americans visit as a tourist, they don't know anything about Europe either. So I wanted to make this video not claiming to be an insane expert who knows everything about life in Europe, but as someone who's lived here in 4 different countries for about 5 years and give sort of the North American friendly overview of what it's like to live in Europe in different countries. So to go through all the different options. So if you are like a digital nomad or an expat, someone looking to live abroad and you're wondering what country you should choose, I want to give you some more insight into that. So to keep things somewhat manageable, I am going to group countries, especially the ones I haven't actually lived in myself. And I'm going to start at the top of Europe and then move down. So we will start with Scandinavia, this being Finland, Sweden, Norway, and Denmark. Scandinavia is cold and has very long winters. This is the first thing that you probably want to understand, especially if you're considering a long-term move. Now, this plays, I think, an important role in their culture because you have very high levels, like in Norway, a lot of people are into heavy metal and sort of very high suicide rates and a little darker side of culture in many ways. Now, on the other hand, Scandinavians are very progressive and open-minded. Whether that's a good or a bad thing is up to you to decide. And of course, in terms of things like design, innovation, that way, Scandinavia is very famous for that. There's also a very high cost of living there in general. So if you're going to get a job, Scandinavia could be a great place to do it, especially because the level of English is also going to be really high. So if you need to work there, English is probably no problem. But if you're going there as like a digital nomad who's earning the same income no matter where you live, Scandinavia probably wouldn't be my first choice, except for maybe spending a couple weeks in the summers. The next is going to be my home, my hood here, which is the really white former Soviet people. They are not Eastern Europeans. Do not call them Eastern Europe. They get so mad. This is the Central Europe, which is like Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia. I'll include Hungary in there. Let me check the map. Yeah, that's all I'm going to include in there. And these countries all have a similar cost of living, and I would say a similar standard of living, Prague being at the highest end of it in terms of all of those. But these are all former Soviet countries that did not want to be Soviet countries. So the difference between this part and some places further east is that very few people here really wanted to be dominated by the Soviets. The culture is much less Russian than it is Slavic, than it is like Central European. Previously, Austria and Czech Republic were part of an empire together. At one point, the Czech Republic, Prague in particular, was the seat of the Holy Roman Empire. So it's very much a European, like Central, Western European country that got stuck in a bad spot at the end of World War II. So that's something you see in these countries in terms of their development and quickly becoming like the rest of Europe. I think Czech Republic will be on par with Germany and stuff within 20 years in terms of incomes and everything else. And in terms of standard of living, I mean, the trams here already have Wi-Fi. It has the best transportation system of any country I've ever, or city I've ever been in. So it's already kind of getting there. Poland, so I'll go through the 4 countries. Poland, you're going to find, is much more uniform. Of everybody is white and kind of looks the same. There's a few other countries in Europe that are like that where they just don't have the immigrants. So there might be some higher levels of racism there, but more than that, if you are someone of color, you're just going to get looks because you stand out. There's not a lot of, people who aren't Polish and white. Even as like a Canadian, you stand out. So that's something to keep in mind with those countries, but it's not like terribly bad from my understanding, traveling there with friends and talking to people about it and stuff like that. Poland, I found the people to be very hardworking, and they also do enjoy to drink. Czech Republic is similar, although maybe slightly less hardworking. I'm not sure though. And then Slovakia and Hungary are, I don't know, similar. All these countries you're going to find quite a diverse mix of people right now. You have a younger generation that's learning English or speaks fairly good English, not like Scandinavian level, but decent enough English, and likes to travel, is working hard, likes to be part of Europe. And then you have the older generation that wears Crocs out to the bar and is in sweatpants and is, no, this is not all the older generation, but you definitely see people that are just like, wow, okay, that's the stereotype of this part of the world. But then you see the complete opposite as well. A lot of like innovation, startups, things like that as well. So it's a really interesting part of the world to be in. Beer is cheap, alcohol is cheap. Cost of living in Prague isn't so cheap. It's went up a lot, but the rest of this region is fairly reasonable to live in. Cheaper than Germany, especially eating out and entertainment is a lot cheaper. Rent and groceries and stuff, not necessarily, but eating out is very nice cost of living here. You're gonna find the language, my hunch is in Poland and Czech, you're gonna have more English than you will in Hungary, and probably more than Slovakia as well. For me, as is clear because I've chosen Prague, this part of Europe is a great balance between being a little exotic still and having some interesting changes happening in some different parts of their culture, but at the same time, it's easy to live here. I'm not gonna lie to you and pretend like it's some cultural experience. It's, you can order groceries online. There's the equivalent of Amazon and all this to get things you need. So it's especially in Prague, it's a very easy life as well. It's very modern in all senses. So thanks for watching and stay tuned for the next video where we're going to cover France, Spain, Portugal, Italy, and one of my personal favorites where I've lived not once, not twice, but 3 times, Germany. So be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on those.